regarded as important by Christians, it is the case that some sections of it are universally favoured over others. And the parable of the Good Samaritan is one of those sections. It isn't hard to see why. The parable conveys a message that is broad and generous. It shows love in action. It's tantalising for the way in which it can be extended and applied in any era. It's easy enough for kids to understand and deep enough that adults can explore things in depth and still learn more. It does prove a challenge for a preacher who desires to be original, though. As in all probability, there are hundreds of sermons being preached on this text around Perth alone today. Thousands if we look at the nation. And if you take a global perspective and the full sweep of Christian history, there will have been hundreds of thousands, probably millions of sermons on this text. So I'm not going to try and be original. I'll just go for a simple study of the text and see how we can apply it. So let's start at the beginning. A lawyer stood up to test Jesus. And when it says lawyer, it basically means a Bible expert, to someone who, a Bible scholar. And the answer that he gives to the question that he posed to Jesus is bang on. It's a great answer. And those two commandments, the love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, strength, love your neighbour as yourself, they're drawn from the Jewish holy law in Deuteronomy 6:5 and Leviticus 19:18. But pressing further, he wants to know who his neighbours are. Who are these people that we are meant to love, that he is meant to love, just as he loves himself? Who are they? And so unfolds the parable. A man was going down from Jerusalem. Now at this point, hearers and readers of the parable can easily make the assumption, because it's a very reasonable assumption, that the man is Jewish. But it actually doesn't say that anywhere. It doesn't specify that he was Jewish. He may be an important Jewish man from the city, or he may be a Gentile who had been about some business there. He may be an innocent sort who was held in high regard by people. Maybe he had committed some crime spree in Jerusalem and was heading away with a bunch of stolen goods. We cannot know. We cannot know. And according to the heart of the parable, which comes from the heart of Jesus, that doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. The guy is a human being. Full stop. End of story. He's a human being. That's it. And so he's attacked and robbed. Stripped, maybe naked, maybe left partially clothed, and left half dead. Maybe he looks all the way dead. Maybe he is crying out in pain and moving to try and get in a position where someone may help him and see him. Again, it's not clear. You can imagine it as you will. But a priest and Levite come by. And these are people who share the identity and the faith of the lawyer who questions Jesus initially. So we're meant to understand the lawyer at least has a vested interest in cheering these guys on to be the good guys. And of course, being Jewish himself, Jesus has a reason for making them out to be in the right, for making them out to be the good guys. But he doesn't do that. The priest and the Levite pass by. Now, some commentators suggest they would have thought that the victim was all the way dead and thus were unwilling to touch him because of purity laws. Some think maybe they suspected an ambush. Maybe they had a way of identifying the person as not Jewish like them. So if he was naked, maybe he was uncircumcised. Who knows? Jesus leaves those details out for us to consider ourselves. The point is, they had the same faith, the same law, the same identity as Jesus and the lawyer, and yet they deliberately went past and withheld aid. That's the point. And onto the scene comes the Samaritan. Now, there is a rivalry here, the origin of which has been mostly lost to history. There are some clues in the Bible about it, but it's not clear. It's a bit murky. But ultimately, you've got the Jewish people who are aligned with Jerusalem in the south of the Holy Land, and the Samaritans in the north, who also claimed Hebrew ancestry and to be called by the one God, and they had their own temple and everything. And each group held the other in mutual contempt, basically. So you may remember just 2 weeks ago, I'll be impressed if you can remember it, to be honest, the gospel reading had Jesus and the disciples enter a village full of Samaritans. Quite surprising he did that. But the people there rejected him. And the disciples asked Jesus, how about we call down fire from heaven and burn them all? Wouldn't that be nice? To which Jesus replied, no. So whenever you come across mention of Samaritans in the Gospels, you need to keep that depth of enmity in mind. But the Samaritan in this parable is shown as being amazing. He goes to considerable personal expense to take care of this stranger. So which is the neighbour in this scenario? Jesus asks. And it's striking. The lawyer won't even utter the word Samaritan. He can't say that word. He still tries to keep distance by simply describing him as the one who showed him mercy. That's as far as he can go. The one who shows mercy, shows kindness, is the true neighbour. And like the basic humanity of the one who was attacked, this fundamental quality takes precedence over tribal loyalty, ethnic tension, and religious purity. So the application of this story is thus quite simple, though I wouldn't say it's simplistic. Jesus has no illusions about the complexity of life, and I hope we don't either. But who is our neighbour? Who is our neighbour? A modern Jewish New Testament Bible scholar named Amy Jill Levine has some thoughts on how to apply this. And she suggests we think of ourselves as the person in the ditch, and then consider, is there anyone from any group that we could not stand to acknowledge as having given us help in that situation? And likewise, is there anyone who would rather die than help us? Is there anyone that you could not stand to acknowledge as being the one to give you help? If you think along those lines, and the implications become more and more shocking as the boundary line of who our neighbour is just grows and grows. And at this point, it can be very tempting to go for easy examples to illustrate this. But I want to intentionally try and highlight examples that are maybe a bit unsettling and potentially offensive. So imagine an Australian member of the Base, which is listed as a far-right terrorist organisation, which seeks to establish a white fascist ethno-state. That's the person in the ditch, the member of the Base. And the person who rescues them and cares for them is an Asian immigrant who is a faithful Muslim. Or you can imagine it the other way around. Maybe it's a cattle farmer who is rescued by a militant vegan activist, or vice versa. It's a Tamil tiger and a Sinhalese government soldier. It's Catholics and Protestants back in the day. It's Al-Qaeda and a Jewish person. Who would you not want to help? Who would you not want to help? And then imagine helping them. Start playing with that idea and see how much you can make it sting. Get it to the point where you just think, there's no way. There's no way. That's meant to be the power of this parable that Jesus told. But then we've got to realise the grace required to live like this does not come from our own strength. It doesn't come from our own strength. But it is what God wants to pour into our hearts as we go through this world, which can often be dangerous and divisive. Asking the Lord to dwell in your heart is the only way I know of to make this parable and what it communicates a lived reality. Asking the Lord to be in your heart is the only way I know how to do it. But that is what we are about here. That is what we are meant to be about. So may God give us all strength and faith to hear this parable anew, to recognise Christ in one another, and to rely on the Spirit to help us on our own journeys down the road.